Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a sales representative for a medical equipment company, which means I'm on planes at least twice a week. I've learned to keep my head down, noise-canceling headphones ready, and never make eye contact with anyone who looks like they might want to chat for 3 hours straight. This trip was supposed to be different though, a real vacation, my first real break in 18 months. I was exhausted, burnt out, and desperately looking forward to a week of doing absolutely nothing on a beach. I'd boarded early because I'd paid extra for priority boarding, one of those small luxuries I allow myself when flying. I got settled in my seat about 6 rows from the front, pulled out my book, and waited for everyone else to board. That's when I first heard it, a child crying. Not unusual on a flight, but this was different. This was the kind of sobbing that gets louder and more dramatic over time, the kind that tells you someone is making a scene. The family was seated a few rows ahead of me. A mother, father, and 2 kids, one probably around 8 years old, and the other maybe 10. The younger one, a girl, was the source of the crying. At first, I tried to ignore it. Kids cry on planes all the time. Maybe she was scared of flying, or tired, or just being a kid. But when more passengers boarded and found their seats, the crying got worse. It was like she was ramping up for something. The mother kept trying to soothe her, but in that way where you can tell the parent is actually encouraging the behavior rather than stopping it. You know the type. Finally, after most people were seated and we were clearly close to departure time, the mother flagged down a flight attendant. I had no choice but to listen at this point. The whole section could hear them. The mother told the flight attendant that she needed her to ask the captain one more time if they could have their dog in the cabin with them. The flight attendant, a patient woman probably in her 40s, kept her professional smile and explained that they had discussed this at the gate, and their dog was too large to travel in the cabin. She said he was perfectly safe in the pet compartment below. This was apparently the wrong answer because the little girl's crying went from loud to absolutely ear-splitting. I mean, this kid could have won an Oscar for this performance. The mother insisted that the flight attendant didn't understand. She claimed her daughter was traumatized and that the dog was her emotional support. The flight attendant said she completely understood and told them that the pet compartment was temperature-controlled and safe. She explained that many animals traveled that way every day without any issues. By now, everyone in the front half of the plane was watching. The father sat there looking uncomfortable but not saying anything to help the situation. The other kid just stared at his phone, probably mortified. Then someone a couple rows behind me spoke up. An older gentleman with a raspy voice announced that he had a severe allergy to dogs. He explained that was why he always made sure to fly on airlines with proper pet policies. He said if that dog came in the cabin, he would need to get off the plane. You could feel the tension ratchet up immediately. The mother whipped around to look at him, and her face went red. She asked him if he was serious right now, saying her daughter needed her dog. The passenger replied that he needed to breathe. The flight attendant tried to step in. She asked everyone to please stay calm and told them that the dog was not coming into the cabin. She explained that he was already loaded below with the luggage and they were about to depart. But the mother wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She stood up, which made the flight attendant visibly tense. The mother said fine, then demanded that they get their luggage and their dog off the plane right now. She announced they would find another airline that actually cared about families and allowed all family members in the cabin where they belonged. The flight attendant looked toward the cockpit, clearly calculating something. She told the mother that they had already closed the doors and the luggage was loaded. She explained that going through all of it to find theirs would delay the entire flight. She reminded her that they had a schedule to keep and 200 other passengers who needed to get to their destination. The mother said she didn't care about their schedule and repeated her demand to get their bags and their dog right now. The father finally spoke up, but weakly. He started to suggest that maybe they should just accept the situation, but the mother cut him off and told him not to start. She insisted that their daughter was suffering. The daughter, right on cue, wailed even louder. The flight attendant was clearly at the end of her rope trying to figure out how to handle this situation. I felt bad for her. This was way above her pay grade. Then the mother said the words that changed everything. She crossed her arms and looked the flight attendant dead in the eye. She asked if they would turn back in an instant and go through it all if there was a bomb, wouldn't they? The entire plane went silent. I mean completely, totally silent. Even the daughter stopped crying for a second. Every passenger froze. The flight attendant's expression changed from frustrated to deadly serious in a heartbeat. She told the mother to please remain seated and that they would see what they could do. She turned and walked quickly toward the front of the plane, picking up the phone near the galley. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw her speaking urgently to someone. The mother sat back down looking smug, like she just won some great victory. The father looked like he wanted to disappear into his seat. Less than a minute later, I'm not exaggerating, less than 60 seconds, the door to the plane opened and 3 police officers came on board. Not airport security, actual police. One of the officers announced that they needed the family in seats 7A through 7D to gather their belongings and come with them. The mother's face went from smug to confused to panicked in about 3 seconds. She asked what was happening and why, insisting she hadn't done anything. The officer told her she needed to come with them, and he said it now. The mother protested that this was ridiculous, that she just wanted her dog, and that she had rights. The father seemed to finally realize what his wife had done, and asked her in a horrified tone what she had said. The officer told them all that they needed to deplane immediately. The older kid had looked up from his phone now, and both children were starting to understand that something was very wrong. The daughter had stopped crying entirely and looked scared. The mother was still arguing when the officers basically herded them out of their seats and down the aisle. The father followed, carrying bags, looking absolutely mortified. When they passed my row, I heard the mother still trying to argue with the officers. She kept insisting this was an overreaction and that she was just trying to keep her family together. One of the officers told her that making threats on an aircraft was a federal offense and that she could discuss it further at the station. The family was escorted off the plane while everyone watched in stunned silence. Once they were gone, the flight attendant made an announcement apologizing for the delay and thanking everyone for their patience. She said we would be departing shortly. I could hear people around me starting to whisper and talk about what had just happened. The passenger with the dog allergy let out a relieved sigh. Someone behind me muttered about how some people just don't know when to stop. About 10 minutes later, another announcement came over the speaker. The captain explained that they were removing the family's luggage and the dog from the cargo hold, which would take just a few more minutes. He thanked us again for our patience and said we would still arrive close to our scheduled time. True to his word, another 5 minutes passed and we felt the plane start to move. We were finally backing away from the gate. The entire cabin seemed to relax when we began rolling toward the runway. I looked out my window while we taxied, and that's when I saw it. Near the terminal, a police car was parked with its lights on. I could see the family standing nearby. The mother was in handcuffs, being placed in the back of the police car. The father stood there with both kids looking absolutely devastated. The daughter was crying again, but this time it seemed like genuine distress rather than a manipulative tantrum. The older kid had his arms crossed and was staring at the ground. The father was clearly trying to comfort them while also looking like his whole world had just collapsed. The dog, a large golden retriever, was sitting in a crate next to their pile of luggage. At least the animal was okay. When we lifted off the ground and Miami disappeared below us, I thought about what I'd just witnessed. That mother had been so convinced she was right, so determined to get her way, that she'd thrown around words she clearly didn't understand the weight of. On an airplane, in the current world we live in. And now she was probably facing federal charges while her family's vacation was completely ruined. I settled back into my seat and opened my book. The cabin was peaceful now. No crying, no yelling, no drama. Just the quiet hum of the engines and passengers settling in for the flight. Honestly, watching that entitled mother get hauled away in handcuffs while her husband and kids stood there dealing with what she'd done was the most satisfying start to a vacation I'd had in years. My brother has brain injuries from when he was younger, nothing that damaged his brain permanently, but it affects how he functions day to day. Taking care of him and watching my parents struggle with it all took a toll on everyone. I developed depression and anxiety somewhere along the way, but I never really talked about it. I just thought if I kept my head down and didn't make waves, things would get better. But keeping my head down made me an easy target. The bullying started when I was 4 years old. 4. I didn't even understand what was happening at first. Kids would push me, call me names, exclude me from games. When I got older, it got worse. By the time I hit primary school, I was the kid nobody wanted to sit next to. Nobody wanted to be my partner for projects. If someone was forced to work with me, they'd complain the whole time. Through all of this, there was one girl who made my life absolutely miserable. She was the most popular girl in every school we attended together. Everyone wanted to be her friend. Everyone wanted her approval. And for some reason, she decided I was her favorite punching bag. She didn't just bully me with words. She'd shove me in the hallways, trip me, throw things at me. She treated her own family the same way. I'd heard she assaulted her younger brother regularly and even hit her own mother. Her dad seemed like a decent guy, but he was powerless against her and her mother, who enabled every single thing she did. When I tried to tell teachers what was happening, they'd brush it off. The schools always said their students would never do such things, and if I ever defended myself or fought back, then suddenly I was the problem. I was the troublemaker. She could do whatever she wanted and walk away clean, but the second I reacted, I was in the wrong. Her mother was just as bad. She spread lies about my family all over town. She told people my mother was an alcoholic and that I was abused at home. None of it was true. My mother did drink sometimes to cope with the stress of everything, but she wasn't an alcoholic. She never drank huge amounts, and she was never a bad mother. But people believed what they wanted to believe. By the time I was 16, I'd had enough. I was so worn down that I barely recognized myself anymore, but something snapped in me one day on the bus ride to school. I was sitting there minding my own business when I overheard her talking to another boy. He was a foster kid, kind of a brat, and the two of them loved to gang up on people. They were talking about me, about my family, about my brother, my mother, my father, my grandparents. All of it was nasty, cruel stuff. I turned around and told them to shut up. Karen looked at me and said the conversation didn't concern me. I shot back that they were talking about me and my family, so they could either shut up or share their conversation with the entire bus. The boys smirked at me and said they were talking about how my brother was mentally disabled, how my mom was an alcoholic, how my dad was abusive, and how my grandparents were delusional. None of it was true. I looked at the boy and told him he had no right to talk. I reminded him that his parents did cocaine and his siblings had rammed a pole through his thick skull. I said he had no leg to stand on when it came to talking about loving families and told him to get lost. This boy had also done awful things to me over the years. The boy's face went red and he looked down. He didn't say another word. Karen snapped at me that I couldn't say that. I told her she couldn't spread rumors and lies about my family. She insisted she could because it was all true. I was shaking. My hands were clenched into fists. I wanted to hit her so badly, but I didn't. The argument went on for a while, back and forth, until she said something that made me see red. She told me that at least her mom loved her and wasn't an alcoholic. That was it. I'd had enough. I told her that at least I was loved more than food. She screamed and asked if I was calling her mom fat. I said that if the boot fits, but let's be honest, it probably wouldn't. She started ranting and screaming, but I just turned around and played on my phone. I was done engaging with her. When we got off the bus, she followed me around school all day. During break, during lunch, everywhere I went, she was there trying to provoke me. I told my head of year what was happening, and they arranged for me to take the school minibus home instead. The next day or two, things were quiet. I rode the bus and nothing happened. But on the way home, we got off at the same stop. Before I could walk away, she grabbed a worm off the ground and screamed something at me. Then she shoved it down my shirt. I have a phobia of bugs and small creatures. I also hate being touched on my neck. I screamed and pushed her away trying to get the worm out. She called me a coward. I ignored her and walked home, jumping around and shaking my shirt until the worm fell out. When I got inside, I told my mother everything. She was already aware of what had been happening on the bus and over the years, but this was the last straw for her. That Sunday, Karen walked past our house. My mother had been to a wine festival an hour earlier. She wasn't drunk, but she did smell like alcohol. She saw Karen walking by, ran outside, and screamed at her for everything she'd put me through over the years. Later that evening, we got a phone call from Karen and her mother. They said a bunch of stupid things and claimed they'd called the police. My mother hung up on them. 2 days later, the police showed up at our door. I wasn't worried. We hadn't done anything wrong. We sat down and explained everything. I told them about all the years of bullying, the assaults, the rumors, everything. The police told us that, judging by our body language compared to theirs, they knew who was lying. A few days later, we got another call. Karen had been given a black mark on her record, a criminal mark that would follow her forever. Back in 2003, I was working at this factory that made engineered floor joists. You know, those wooden I-beam things that hold up floors in houses. My job was operating the glue machine, which sounds simple enough, but it was actually pretty specific work. The machine would press glue onto the wood, and I had to constantly monitor it to make sure everything was running right. The factory itself was your typical industrial place. Loud, smelly from all the wood and chemicals, and filled with heavy machinery that could seriously hurt you if you weren't careful. I've been working there for about 2 years at that point, and I knew my job inside and out. The pay was decent for the area, and honestly, I needed the money. I had bills piling up like everyone else. Now there was this one guy who worked the opposite shift from me. Real sketchy character. Let's just call him Sketch because that's exactly what he was. This guy had a reputation around the factory for being a thief. Not big stuff, mind you, but annoying things. He'd steal people's lunches from the break room fridge, pocket small tools that weren't his, take nuts and bolts, whatever he could grab. Everyone knew it was him, but somehow management never did anything about it. Maybe they could improve it, or maybe they just didn't care enough. Either way, Sketch kept getting away with it. Part of my job required this special tool. It looked like a miniature metal hockey stick about 18 inches long. I used it to check the glue flow on both sides of the machine. Without it, the only way to check the far side was to literally stick my arm through the machine and use a small stick to reach. The near side was easy since I didn't have to reach through anything dangerous, but that far side? That required putting my arm between moving parts, which is exactly as stupid as it sounds. So Monday morning rolls around, I clock in, walk over to my station, and my hockey stick tool is gone. Just vanished. I looked everywhere around my work area. Nothing. I asked the weekend shift supervisor if he'd seen it. He said it hadn't been there since Friday afternoon when I left. My mind immediately went to Sketch. Of course it did. Who else would steal a random specialized tool? I walked straight to the main office to talk to the safety coordinator. This guy was supposed to be all about worker safety, making sure we followed protocols, that kind of thing. I explained the situation to him, telling him that my tool was missing and that it was the one I needed to safely check the glue on the far side. He just told me to use the small stick method instead. I said that meant shoving my arm into the machine and that I wasn't doing that. He responded by saying I could walk out right now if I refused. I just stared at him. Was this guy serious? I left his office and went to find the main boss, thinking surely he'd be more reasonable. I explained everything to him, hoping he'd see the safety issue. But he told me he wasn't getting involved in this and that I needed to talk to safety. Great. Just great. So I walked back to the safety coordinator's office and I had an idea. I told him that if he was going to make me do this, I wanted it in writing that he was ordering me to use improper tools for the job. He laughed a bit and said that no one had ever been hurt there before and that he thought I was safe. But he actually did it. He wrote it up, signed it, and handed it to me. I took that paper and tucked it into my pocket, feeling both vindicated and terrified at the same time. By the time lunch rolled around, I'd already stuck my arm through that machine at least 6 times. Each time my heart was pounding, but nothing bad happened. I started thinking maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it really was safe after all. Then it happened. I reached through the machine with a small stick trying to check the glue line on the far side. My glove caught on something. Before I could even process what was happening, it got pinched between the roller press. The pressure was instant and crushing. My hand was pulled in and I felt this explosion of pain that I can't even properly describe. It was like every nerve in my hand lit up at once. The machine had an emergency stop feature that activated when something jammed the rollers. Thank God for that, or it would have been so much worse. But even with the machine stopped, my hand was stuck, completely crushed between these massive rollers. People started gathering around. It took 10 minutes to loosen the rollers enough to free my hand. 10 minutes of absolutely agonizing pain, while I stood there trapped. The safety guy showed up. The main boss showed up. Everyone was just standing there watching. When they finally got my hand out, I looked straight at the safety coordinator. Blood was dripping everywhere. My hand looked like something from a horror movie, and I asked him if he was glad he signed that paper this morning. His face went completely white. They rushed me to the hospital. The damage was extensive. 3 fingers needed 30 stitches total. 1 tendon had to be sewn back together. My pinky finger was the worst. The bone was completely crushed and had to be reconstructed, and my wrist was dislocated on top of everything else. At the hospital, company representatives showed up pretty quickly. They pushed workers' compensation hard, telling me I should file for it, and that it would cover everything. I asked them if that meant I couldn't sue. The rep didn't answer that directly, but I knew what it meant. I refused. That's when the company came back with an offer. Actually, 2 offers. Either a lump sum payment or a yearly payout for 10 years, plus full medical coverage. Both amounts were honestly more than fair, especially considering what happened next. The company fired the safety coordinator that same day. They immediately started mandatory safety training courses for everyone, including all the office staff. They were clearly taking this seriously, probably terrified of what could happen if I did sue. I thought about it. I really did. But they'd made significant changes. The guy who caused this was gone. They were fixing their procedures, and the money they offered was genuinely good. I accepted the yearly payout option. That money just ran out 3 years ago, so I had income from it until 2022. After extensive physical therapy, I got back about 90% use of my hand. Could I have pushed for more? Probably. Could I have gone for full-blown revenge? Absolutely. But sometimes you have to know when enough is enough. The factory closed down about 5 years later, but that was because of the recession, not because of what happened to me. When Sketch? I heard he got fired from his next job for stealing too. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.